All right, so it is 2 o'clock, and thank you very much for coming. You guys are freaking awesome. So this is, as you can see up here, the Keep It Retro panel, featuring us, the guys from RetrowareTV.com. We are kind of just a bunch of guys who talk about retro games and love old video games and love old stuff in general. So that's basically what we're going to be talking about. And I assume you guys like video games, right? Right? Otherwise, what to be here? Boom! So focus of this panel is just going to be talking about what is the definition of retro, how that definition is changing, what we consider to be retro, and how we implement that into the work we do for our website and elsewhere. So, let's see if I can get this to work. Curse you, new technology. This is why I write about retro games. F5. There you go. So, just to give you a little icebreaker here. So, retro. So, like I said, what exactly is that? What? It's so the conversation about retro games kind of has a fairly solid definition. Most people either associate it with like the Atari 2600 or the NES. Usually one of those is the starting point, and then it kind of just goes off from there. So, like for instance, people would usually call it something like this. Like this is undeniably a retro video game console. This too, probably. I guess most people have heard of this. And then this, and there you go. See. But then you start getting to a bit more murkier kind of territory when you get to a certain point. So I'm interested. So just by a show of hands, how many people consider this to be a retro video game console? Oh, good, excellent, wonderful. Because this is really when people really start to get picky about it, because we as retro gamers kind of hold our own memories kind of sacred. So to us, if we grew up with the NES, we think the NES is the end-all be-all starting point of video games. And
I have a secondary question though, to that. Mm-hmm. How many people in here are in their 20s? How many are in their 30s? Okay.
That
might also inform your question.
Essentially the point I'm trying to make.
Did you guys from Meavers?
No, random Google search is your friend. So basically the idea of retro is changing and it's constantly evolving. So just as a reference point, this guy, I assume you know who he is. He is kind of the godfather of this whole kind of internet conversation about retro gaming. I mean, obviously people talked about video games before AVGN. People will probably keep talking long after the whole internet thing has died down. But as far as where we're at right now, he kind of was the godfather of the whole scene. And so basically, when it started with him, we moved on to this guy, and then we moved on to this guy. And then eventually we got to this guy. So now starting with this guy, JonTron. Everyone's familiar with JonTron, I'd say. So JonTron's kind of an interesting case because he's kind of a younger guy talking about retro games, talking about video games. He's clearly inspired by guys like AVGN, but he kind of skews more towards like the N64, PlayStation kind of stuff. He's a big fan of Banjo-Kazooie. So, and that's actually the generation that I grew up as a part of, so I can relate to that. But to people who are older and started out with the Atari or the NES, maybe not so much. And then you also got guys like this guy. I don't know if you watch Catakaris, but he also makes great videos. But he's a big PlayStation fan. He is all about the PS1. So again, we're seeing that kind of changing definition of retro. So whereas the NES was kind of seen as like the sacred ground of where all video games were perfect, to Caddy it was the PS1. That's his happy place. And he's trying to remember why video games are awesome. So the question is, will we eventually see retro gaming kind of, like the face of retro gaming changed. So could in the future, could Crash Bandicoot replace Mario? Probably not, but it's an interesting thought. So then the question becomes, how do we preserve classic gaming culture? And what exactly does that mean? Well, like I said, we here at RetroWare kind of do a whole lot of stuff to try and keep the memories of retro alive. So you could do a whole lot of things. You could do epic game music, for instance. You could do some pretty awesome videos, you know? You could write articles, or you could pretty much do whatever the heck you want. I mean, the possibilities are endless. So now you know. And knowing is half the battle, gee, on the joke. So just as another icebreaker here, just before we start getting to like the really pretentious intellectual stuff here, let's have a little bit of fun. So I brought a couple of things. I don't know if you guys brought anything with you, or if you can well, nice. So I'm just gonna do a little bit of a pop quiz and see what you guys can tell me about a couple of old video game relics. So, and if you guys can think of anything off the top of your head, by all means do so. We'll set these right here. Show of hands, who knows this guy? All right, you sir. Well, yes, correct. Can you tell me at least 2 things that this guy did, or just 2 random facts about this thing?
I know the flash the TV would trigger the sensors to the eyes,
Mm-hmm.
the gyro,
Yes, that's basically it. Come on up here. I got some prizes and stuff.
Here, take these at the very least.
Ninja Turtles.
Yes.
Yep, take some.
Oh, wow, thank God. Answer questions.
It's how we encourage participation.
Rivalries.
Rivalry. It's your best friend.
What is this?
You.
Power pad.
Yes. What did this thing do?
You jump on it and it controls stuff on the screen. It's good for stuff like track and field.
Absolutely. Come on up here.
Alright.
Can you name the ridiculously rare game that is playable on the Power Pack for the NES?
Fortunately, I do not have it. You like Sonic?
Oh, hell yeah.
Take the Sonic.
Oh, I didn't do that.
You're welcome. I don't know.
Okay, anybody else? Anybody got like a random thing? Name a random piece of retro vintage hardware.
So this is the Zapper.
The Zapper?
Yeah.
Anyone tell me any random thing about the Zapper? Cyrus?
Yeah, he was orange and gray.
Uh-huh.
Played Gumshoe. Was an NES light gun. Only works on CRT TVs.
Keep going.
Why does it only work on CRT TVs?
I believe it. The video. It has something to do with the sensor in the gun. I think, and the TV, the signal from the TV gets set, or the light reflects off the TV. Doesn't work.
Close enough. Basically, like, there's a delay on any modern TV for like LCD TVs and stuff like that. That on a cathode ray tube TV, they expect it to be immediate, and it's a certain number of flashes per second at 60 hertz, and it doesn't work somewhat well on LCD. So I'll take that though. Here you go.
Yeah.
Is that the sense of the refresher rate, or
Like
Yes.
that
Yes.
was the light bulb thing? Is that true?
Nope.
Hmm.
I'll put it this way: I have never seen video proof of that, and I think it was just one of those playground myths. That if anyone has never heard the idea of using a zapper on a light bulb to automatically get hits every time, it won't, because basically the way the zapper, you didn't ask, but the way the zapper works is that it would, like if you're playing Duck Hunt, it makes the screen black at first. And then the zapper needs to read that it's black, and then it has white marks for the that pop up really quickly for the targets. So basically, for the zapper to work correctly, it needs to read black and then white in basically 2/60ths of a second. And if it doesn't read that, then it counts as a miss. So it had some, you know, anti-cheating device kind of built in. So obviously, if you're just hitting a light bulb, it's going to be yellow or sorry, white. So that won't work.
Another random thing. What was actually probably the craziest playground video game myth you ever heard? And actually believe?
That if you could input a proper code, like the proper code into Final Fantasy VII at the start screen, Tifa Lockhart would go on screen and do a striptease in front of you. That was the weirdest thing I ever heard.
That you believe?
Yes, I was 13 at the time, so.
That's terrible. Mine was a friend of mine told me that you could play as all 150 Pokemon in the original Smash Brothers. Because I was super into Pokemon, I love me some Smash Brothers. I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? They're all in there, right?
It's not a playground myth, but if anyone watched or read EGM, back when it was a thing about a decade or so ago, there was an April Fool's prank where they said, here's how you unlock Sonic and Tails in Smash Brothers Melee, and you have to do you have to beat 30 guys on Cruel Melee or something, and I did that! That's how much I believed it. Like, oh, maybe, it's probably a joke, but what if it isn't? And I actually put a lot of time into doing that. It was a joke.
Yeah, that kind of reminded me of the Shin Long incident.
Yeah, that's true, in Mortal Kombat, right?
Yeah.
Street Fighter, yeah.
I like the in Resident Evil 2.
Yeah. Okay, so anybody got another pop quiz question? One last one?
Give us a music question, James.
Yeah.
Music question.
Project.
Sorry, I'm spacing on that.
He's having a rough night. So, see here. Okay, anybody tell me anything about the PC Engine? Anything about the PC Engine. I don't care. Just, what color was it?
It was widely bright.
It was white. I always admire how they actually use the technology to enhance the graphics and sound as opposed to just using it for gimmicks like the Sega CD did. I believe, in fact, that was what you said in the Rondo Glove video, and I thought that was a great way to put it. It had a very cool name, I thought, for it in Japan, and I like how the CD unit actually was designed with it in mind, you know, like right below it, as opposed to like, kind of looked like a weird attachment for ours. Should I keep going?
Oh, no, that's good.
And to this date, it's the smallest home console, major console release. It's the original PC Engine, so the size of the base.
And I really dislike how much Nintendo's monopoly affected it. You know, I really don't know how they got away with that. Like kept the games off and stuff like that. And they still managed to make a really great system.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, do you like Pokemon cards? Because I got Pokemon cards after Wazoo. And also, you can get. I'm gonna give you two because these aren't particularly great games, but they're still interesting. So, you got Scooby Doo and you get Durkin, so have fun. All right, so great guys. Yeah, so that's awesome. Good to know that we've got some really smart people in this room, so that's great. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about our own work here for a little bit and just kind of talk about our own experiences. So just to start this off here, let's see here. So I guess we really should just start from the beginning. So let's go down from the beginning here with James here. James, what was the very first video game or video game console you've ever played, and how do you think that's affected you personally?
The first console I ever played was the NES. Applause. And yeah, my mother got it for me when I was 3 years old, and that probably has had the most impact on me doing music ever, because as long as I've loved video games, I've loved doing music. And just the songwriting style for all of the NES, because like you had such limited space to fit in any music, so you had to make every melody count, because you're going to hear 10 seconds over and over for hundreds of hours. So yeah, picked a lot from that, and that's really like translated into what I do.
How many channels were on the NES sound check?
There was actually only 4 channels, which is absolutely absurd for any sort of music. Like, that's ridiculous. Because that was only enough for what would be a drum sound, a bass sound, and you have a lead and a rhythm track, which is the base of music, anyways. But that's not a lot to work with. You can't, and also there were sound effects, so some of the sound effects would cut into the music, as well.
Kind of a weird case because I didn't have my own systems till like 98, 99. I had learning games for the home computer when those are not really fun. But my cousins...
Dude, Oregon Trail, come on.
5 of adventure will not pass an afternoon quickly. But my cousins who lived 5 minutes away had an NES and a Genesis, and we'd hang out every weekend, and I'd play the crap out of Sonic 2, the Zelda, Mario. I tried to play the crap out of Castlevania, but I'm not that good. I guess I started with those 2. More the Genesis because my older cousin locked the NES in her room so we couldn't use it. She liked Zelda too much. She was afraid we'd F up her file, so which I did.
My first home console was the NES. Obvious, probably most people's answer of our age at least. Actually, though, the funny thing is that I played Super Mario Brothers for months before I even knew the NES existed in the arcade.
Wow.
So I wasted a lot of quarters on that before I went over to a friend's house and he pulled out Super Mario Brothers, and my mind was blown that you could play this at home. But yes, that was. Growing up, I have no siblings that are about my age. They were all much older and had already moved out, so I was essentially an only child. I think a lot of people have a similar type of experience, probably, that video games, it's a constant companion. It's something that you can always have with you to cheer you up if something's going wrong, or even to later on make you feel feels. Games like Final Fantasy 3/6 was one of the first ones that actually made me say, "Wow, this is amazing! I can get this out of a video game in terms of feeling." And stuff like that's made me stick with it through thick and thin, to varying degrees. I think everyone at some point in high school probably got to that. Oh, I'm kind of a video game stage, and then after a few more years, maybe in or after college, they're like, wait, I love video games again. Why did I sell my collection? That was stupid. Stuff like that. Anyway.
Right. I totally went through that whole phase a few years ago, so I'm totally broke now thanks to it, but whatever. So yeah, for me, I kind of had unique circumstances growing up because I grew up in the era when the Super Nintendo was just getting big. The N64, the Sega Saturn, and PlayStation 1 were all on its way, but the very first console I ever played was the original Nintendo Entertainment System, and the very first game I ever played was a very crappy version of X-Men from LJN, but made up for it because I also had Super Mario Brothers Duck Hunt, and that was just a religious experience for me the first time I played it. And so I kind of worked my way up from the NES. Then a couple of years later, I got a hand-me-down Super Nintendo from a distant relative, and then I kind of worked my way to the N64, PlayStation, PS2, etc. So I've always kind of come from a retro kind of school of thought when it comes to the writing that I do and the conversations I have with people, which is why I enjoy working with Retroware so well. It's just, I think we all kind of have that kind of perspective, and I think that's what makes our kind of side and the kind of work we do unique.
So, I grew up on the Super Nintendo. That's what my brothers and sisters had. I'm 4 out of 6 kids. We were all born about like 2 or 3 years apart from each other. So I played a lot of games with my brothers and sisters, and my brothers were in a lot of sports and racing games. So my main memory is just playing Super Mario Kart. Also, when you're younger, video games are kind of scary. I remember when we got an N64 and we got GoldenEye. I didn't want to play that. This guy shooting at me. But I guess my main memory is being that my first console, but like probably my most vivid gaming memory is there's a pizza place near our house called Crazy Pizza, and they had an awesome arcade in the back, and they had a fully enclosed sit-down pole position cabinet, and I could play that forever. Like I grew up mainly around racing games like F-Zero, Super Mario Kart, and then pole position, so that's why I'm so into racing games and stuff like that. But in terms of the NES, like I never saw an NES until like 98 or 99 for the first time.
Sheltered child.
Yeah, I know. I remember going up to a neighbor's barbecue, and you know, like those little portable TVs that are like this big?
Yeah.
They had an NES hooked up to that with Duck Hunt. So we played Duck Hunt on this tiny little TV. And they just stuck the gun up to the screen and they just played it like that.
Okay.
I grew up on Super Nintendo, pretty much.
Thank you.
Okay, so all right. So then moving on from that topic, let's just talk about a little bit why we each chose the kind of medium that we do to do our work and to try and talk about games. James, you talked a little bit about music before. Can you go into more depth?
Yeah, I'll totally go into more depth. So basically my background in music, I borrowed my friend's guitar, and that's why I play my guitar left-handed upside down, because I'm playing a right-handed guitar left-handed. I was just borrowing his guitar and it just worked. I just understood how to do it. And so I got good at it, and I joined a band, and I was in a touring band for 10 years. So my video game life and my music life were two separate things, but they were my biggest passions, and it was only a matter of time before they met. And I got inspired by a lot of people doing video game music online, especially, and things like Tommy Tellerico Video Games Live and stuff like that. That was inspirational. But yeah, people like Caleb Elijah or like Family Jewels 7X, like YouTubers. I saw that and I'm like, you know what? That's something I want to do. You know, that's showing people what I'm passionate about. So yeah, I just started doing that, and here I am.
I write because I've always been the kind of person who'll just make up stories and people just believe them, so why not? And I'm good with the words. That I remember, like, oh, you have an essay test of like 6 pages, 2 pages multiple choice. It's like, yes, for some horribly unknown reason. But I like to write. I like to tell stories and share words. And I've been doing that it's for fun anyway, and I apply for regular work to where taking off from there.
So I've been doing videos for over 5 years now, and so like I said before, I always have enjoyed video games. I see not a new medium in the internet, but one with the rise of YouTube and things like being a video game nerd, and it's a new way to kind of directly communicate with people. So you have the angry video game nerd, who obviously is a character. He makes fun of all these bad games that I think I personally played and hated when I was a kid, like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, blah blah blah. But about a little over 5 years ago, I was thinking, you know, that doesn't seem like it'd be too difficult to try to do. And so what could I try to talk about? It's like, well, I think there's a lot of old video games that are kind of overlooked, not praised as much as they were back in the day, and now with things like eBay, it's easier to find stuff like this, and people should really give them a shot. And so that's why I started 16-Bit Gems, talking about games now. I mean, it seems like aren't nearly as poorly known. Like Earthbound is almost a joke in how well known it is for being an underappreciated game. But you know, at the time, it seemed like something that needs to be talked about more. And then later, I did The Way Games Work, because my background is in physics, and I thought that, particularly when the Nintendo 3DS, you know, think whatever you think about the 3D in the Nintendo 3DS. I personally don't use it ever, but it's interesting that you can have 3D without glasses, and I thought it'd be interesting to explain that in the video. And then there's all sorts of interesting technological advancements in gaming and even retro gaming. That's why I've talked about things like the NES Zapper or the Kinect, which I think is a fascinating piece of hardware that unfortunately doesn't really have the software to support it. But that's basically why I got into things.
I think it's interesting you mentioned the AVGN's kind of style because, like I said, he was kind of the starting point for this whole kind of phenomenon. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but because after AVGN, a lot of people started ripping him off, obviously, trying to copy his popularity by tearing down old games, trying to parody and mock them. And that's fun and all that, but kind of the thing that we've always tried to do is try to build up old games. Even if they weren't perfect, even if they had their flaws, we try to see the good in them and try to see the good they did for people. We had, obviously, the 16-bit gems, like we were talking about with his videos. We had the Happy Video Game Nerd, funny enough, on our site for a while, and that's pretty much what he was all about. He was all about finding games that are underappreciated or maybe weren't remembered as fondly as they should be. So we're going into that kind of territory now where people are starting to get over the fact that, okay, yes, there were a lot of bad games back in the day, but you know what? There were a lot of good things about those games too. So let's try to remember that. That was just a brief side note, but I guess for me, as a writer, kind of going off what Mike said, I've been a guy of many passions throughout my younger days. I was big into film. I was big into, obviously, games. I thought about game design for a while. I'd always wanted to do something with games, but one thing I was always good at, and one thing I could always do regardless of the technology I had on me, was write. No matter where I was, I always had a word processor. I could always type. I could always have ideas just pop in my head, and I could always write them down. So if you're the kind of person who wants to talk about games or wants to do something with games just to show how much you love it, literally, like I said before, you can do anything. So if you like writing, all you gotta do is just sit down, write. Doesn't matter if it's good, doesn't matter if you think anybody's gonna want to read it, just do it, and then perfect it until you're satisfied with it and throw it out there, see what happens, because it's that easy. And I feel like I'm tooting my own horn a little bit, but I actually feel very lucky to have the chance to write about games, to be a part of this panel, and be a part and meet all of you the way I am now, because I thought I was just some nobody kid who just couldn't do anything. I couldn't make videos. I didn't think I was all that popular of a guy, but yet RetroWare gave me a shot when they were asking for writers, and now I'm here talking to all you awesome people. So never give up hope. That's the thing.
If you want to start something, the hardest part is just taking that first step, really. You'll never get anywhere if you don't at least try.
Just throwing yourself out there, getting that vulnerability and just going with it.
And it doesn't have to be video. I mean, YouTube is great for starting off videos, or you can write for sites, but I mean, if
There are all sorts of sites looking for stuff still, yeah.
Yeah, but if you want to do something artistic, Etsy, things like that to sell things. I mean, you go out here, you can see all these people that have very, they take their creative arts in retro form and they are able to sell it to people.
But mainly, since I grew up as a Nintendo kid, I never had any of the Sega stuff until I got a Dreamcast when that came out, and that blew my mind. But I still managed to be a Nintendo kid after that. But I still really like the Dreamcast a whole lot. I'm like, I really want to see what other Sega stuff I missed, and the Saturn was the one that drew me in the most because I knew nothing about it. I knew the Genesis, I knew most of the games on there that were big hits, but no one ever mentioned the Saturn. And that's why I was more interested in it than anything else, because I couldn't find anything on it. And when it comes to making the show, I just merely wanted to make a show like everyone else's, but just about something that no one was talking about, and I just wanted to make a show that I would watch. So, yeah.
All right. So then, kind of the last question, I guess, before we try to get you guys a bit more involved in this conversation is, generally, if you're talking to somebody who's trying to get into, like I said, the conversation about games and retro games in particular, what kind of advice can you give them? What would you give?
Kind of jump that question.
Yeah.
If we have to reiterate, we will, because we like the sound of our own voice.
Sorry, what's the question again?
What kind of advice can you give to somebody who wants to get into talking about games?
I'd say don't think, just do, because you know, as you said, taking that first step is the hardest thing. So just motivating yourself and just get into it, get out there, and you know, the first thing you ever do may not be so good, but like you'll get better over time, and so the more you do it, the better you get. So.
And I'd say don't mask your own voice or your own style, because the more you try to mask how you want to say things or how you want to express things with other people that influence you, it's good to have influences and filter them for yourself, not the other way around, because it's the things that stand out that have, you know, quality and insight or artistic value or merit that are going to succeed, and you're going to try and get more people. That's not even just a big audience of people to listen and interact with. If you're going to if you're like the irate gamer, you're not going to do anything. No.
Yes, you got to make that first step. Everyone, when they start out, you get better as time goes on. That's kind of how experience works. If you have, you know, things that you think, you're always going to look back at your first step and think it's crap. That's fine. That's why you get better. That's why you do more. That's why you learn. Don't let that stop you. Find whatever you are passionate about, or whatever you're good at, and apply your passion to it.
I attended a panel at another convention a couple of weeks ago that was actually very interesting. It was talking about getting into the actual game industry from a developer standpoint, and they had a couple of local game developers and had a couple of voice actors, and it was interesting how a lot of the things that they brought up was kind of the same kind of stuff they beat into you in college, which is a lot like what Joey was saying, in that the most popular thing you're going to hear from any teacher in any craft you do is the example they used was art. So in the terms of art, it's you have 1,000 terrible drawings in you. You gotta start getting them out as soon as possible. And basically all what that means is exactly what Joey was saying was you're gonna start out crappy. It's just a matter of fact, because you're not gonna be Picasso and you're not gonna be Da Vinci your first time. You're gonna have to practice. And it's very intimidating to say, oh, I'm not good. Oh, I don't have any talents. Oh, I'm never going to be as good as these other people. And the important thing is to say, fuck that. I am just as awesome as any of these people. I'm going to show you why. And my big rule of thumb is it's important to never be satisfied with your work. If you're a creative person in any medium, never be satisfied. You need to be your own worst critic. But at the same time, always be proud of what you have accomplished. So it's that kind of fine line of self-deprecation, but also dignity and pride in what you're doing. So if you can take that into anything you do, you'll be fine.
Also, when you want to talk about stuff, like, make sure it's something you're really, really passionate about, like something you simply can't stop and shut up about, you know? Like, I can talk for eons about why virtual highlight isn't really that bad. But yeah.
All right, so now I want to get you guys a bit more involved and actually hear about your experiences, because we can go on all day about the stuff that we like, but I want to hear about from you guys. So, anybody want to talk a little bit about their favorite game, favorite console? Anybody? Just want to? No? Anyone? Yes, sir?
I was thinking more along the lines of, you kind of hinted at when you referred to Final Fantasy VII. I find, and this ties into Ocarina of Time too, the idea that the first of whatever it is, I find that to be very inexplicable about why people invariably find that to be the best one. Do you think it's a psychological thing or something like that? You know, kind of like when you were talking about the other panel about playing Wind Waker first. So
I feel like more, I mean, I guess.
And actually, in the hostile sense, you know, like in Final Fantasy, a lot of people will not play the earlier ones because they look at the graphics and they're like, I just don't understand that. Can you reconcile that, or even attempt to explain what kind of mentality that is?
I think you might go back to the part where, like, we're talking about, like, do games age poorly, or they just go to bad games? You know?
Mm-hmm.
I think people, if they only know more recent games, or and like we were saying before, pretty much any form of media, if they only know recent books or TV or video games or movies, it's harder for them to go back and look at what came before, what things evolved from. and you kind of almost have to force them to do that in order for them to know, to have a better education, a better understanding about that. I personally have some reservations about the Atari 2600. That's before my time, and it's really hard for me to get into some of the games on that thing. But I've played a lot of Atari 2600, and I can at least appreciate. I think it's important that I have appreciated what Adventure did for all sorts of adventure games, even RPGs later on in life. That is a hard game to play. You're a pixel wandering around in dungeons, and you're fighting duck dragons. But that to understand that this is like the first console adventure game. This is something that came out in 1979, and before that, it was a lot of Pong clones, more or less. Being somewhat facetious, but still. You can see tropes or standards that were set there that are still kind of being used today. The going from screen to screen and finding secrets, the first Easter egg. That's all important stuff if you want a full understanding of what games are like today, you need to know. And sometimes you got to force yourself to do that. Sometimes other people need to be forced to do that. But I think it makes for a more full understanding of and appreciation for games today.
Derek had kind of an interesting viewpoint he posted on Twitter about 3D graphics versus pixel graphics. He was kind of saying how blocky polygons of the PS1 era are not nearly as pretty to look at as pixels from the 8-bit or 16-bit era. And from a certain perspective, I can understand that because today, people are clearly obsessed with pixel art. It's everywhere. It's kind of become pop art at this point. So, but for me personally, as someone who grew up on PS1 games, it was just wowed by them every time. The first time I saw them, I still find PS1 graphics to be beautiful. As ugly as they are, they're beautiful in their ugliness. So it's got kind of like, can anything really age poorly, or is it just a matter of perspective? So it really all depends, and that's one of the big things I wanted to address was just how generations view gaming differently.
Well, I was going to say that this is also not just something that people, gamers, consumers of the media need to learn. You feel that the industry doesn't or forgets its lessons every once in a while too. It's very cyclical. If you think back to the late 90s, early 2000s, two-dimensional games were pretty much dead. Yeah, that was considered old and the past. No one's going to make 2D games anymore. I'm going off the top of my head. I'm pretty strong, I think, in saying that New Super Mario Brothers basically kind of revived the two-dimensional platformer. And now you see a lot of them all over the place, especially in indie gaming, things like Shovel Knight. And these, for a long time, all the lessons of two-dimensional gaming were kind of just put aside and like, oh no, that's not a necessary form of the medium anymore. It's all three-dimensional now. And now, the industry has realized, hey, there's money to be made in that two-dimensional space, so we should probably make some more games like that.
You know what I really love and I really wish they make more of? 3D platformers. Anybody like a big fan of Donkey Kong 64, Banjo-Kazooie, those types of games? Like, those games fucking rocked, and yet they don't get nearly as much love as they should.
They're collectathons.
Yeah, but see, that's my point, because it became popular for a time to disparage those games because they were quote-unquote collectathons. And one of the things I really enjoy about what we're seeing now with guys like JonTron and everything is that we're seeing more younger people who grew up on those games and still love those games for what they were. And so now it's that kind of phenomenon of, okay, now we're starting to say, okay, yeah, these games may have had some problems, but there were a lot of really good things about them too. Let's not forget that.
Well, I was just going to your point, the Mario Galaxy games did a really good job of, I think maybe the problem with some of the earlier games you mentioned, the pace was so slow. I thought the Mario Galaxy games, both of them, did such a good job of making you feel like you weren't going over this whole big sprawling world. Even though it was a big sprawling gaming universe, you didn't feel like it was big and sprawling and laborious to collect all those things. But whatever they did, however they did it, was great and very fast paced.
Yes, because Mario Galaxy was all about the small little planets. You know, you bounced from one to the next. You were always constantly doing something new. Whereas with Banjo-Kazooie or Donkey Kong 64 especially, it was just one big open area. So you're right, it was a whole lot of area to explore. It was intimidating. But again, I think that's interesting. I'm very excited to see where we might go.
I was just gonna say real quick, but if you look at what Nintendo's showing now with the new Legend of Zelda, they want to go back to the big sprawling world, not the hub and sections. So maybe that's like again, it's cyclical.
That's just the evolution of that style of game. Though. Like Zelda isn't typically considered a platformer by any means. I mean, hell, you can jump, but
that's kind of what I was going to say is that not all games evolve equally, and that's part of the problem of bringing people back to the beginning or back down the line. For example, Mario's evolved in a pretty safe pattern. Some other games too. Sonic the Hedgehog, as much as it pains me to admit it, if someone only knows Sonic 06, the Sonic Wii games or stuff like that, they're not going to be as willing to go through the Genesis and see it for its great points while acknowledging its flaws as part of its developmental cycle. So that's a problem too, is that not all games evolve in a fortunate way. And also, was stuff like you were saying with early polygonal stuff, is that a big part of seeing through the jaggy stuff or the wanky kind of moving around bits of things is that the best way to approach that is seeing it as art through limitations. And the best uses of it are not trying to push things as much as you can go, but use it in a restricted way. And that approach can be seen all throughout the industry.
That's what James was just talking about, the 4 channels on the NES.
Yeah, exactly. No, limitations. When you have limitations, you get more creative because you have to be creative. You have to get the most out of what you have. Just on a side note, with the 2D, 3D Mario games specifically, it's weird. The 3D platformers don't sell as well as the 2D. Like Mario Galaxy, amazing game, sold like shit. Like compared to
New Super Mario.
which, you know, when they launched the Wii U, you would think they would have launched with like Mario Galaxy or some sort of 3D thing, but it made more sense for them financially to go with the 2D. So
Well, then you can argue that it's just easier for people to pick up and play.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they don't have, your grandma doesn't have to worry about her 3-dimensional.
You don't care because I'm in our space.
Yeah, but going back to Sonic though, I think with Generations they were starting to get on the right track with that. I believe. Like I played a lot of Generations and really enjoyed that, and mainly because of when they went back to 2D Sonic with some of those stages. I thought those stages were really great. You know.
And now they're going to ruin it. Now thanks to Sonic Boom. So
what I don't get was like Sonic Generations was arguably the best rated Sonic game in years. And then after its release, Sega's all like, yeah, we don't plan on going back to classic Sonic anymore. I don't understand why. I mean, like, I know the Sonic the Hedgehog 4 games, and they weren't that great.
Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Like, Sega's like, in Sonic Generations, classic Sonic was the only thing that was really good going for that game. Let's get rid of that. You know? It didn't make any sense.
I feel this is part of a going off the topic, but still something, it could be its own panel or podcast topic or whatever, but I was talking about with a couple of others earlier. But sometime around the early 2000s, Japan seemed to stop being the center of the gaming world in terms of the best games kind of coming out of Japan. If you look like at the top 20 whatever selling games every year, nowadays they're virtually all from the West, and I say West including Europe. You look at companies like Square Enix or Capcom or Konami, and you read articles about how they're having this problem or that problem or whatever. And it's just interesting to me that at a time when, you know, 20 so years ago, early 90s, everything was coming out of Japan, more or less. And now it's just not. And the reasons behind that are that, you know, why would Sega make such a strange choice when they've been putting out horrible 3D Sonic game after horrible 3D Sonic game, just saying, "No, we're gonna keep digging this well. We think this is gonna be good."
But recently, I feel like I'm more excited for Japanese games coming out now. Like, say, like the new Zelda game coming out. That's pretty
Nintendo
much,
accepting, by the way.
Yeah. With the new 3D Zelda coming out, it's going to be open world. Like, I immediately think of like Elder Scrolls or Skyrim or whatever. And then like the new Metal Gear just seems like what if Japanese developers took that Western game design that has proved so well recently and gave it a shot? Like, I'm really interested to see what they come up with that. You know.
All right, great.
That was sidetracked.
So yeah, let's. We're running into about 15 minutes before the end of the panel. So let's open up to you guys. You got any questions?
Back to what y'all were talking about, games that not all games evolve at the same rate or as well, and also back to 2D and 3D gaming. If you look at Paper Mario, where it started as obviously 2D because that was the whole gimmick, and then you look at Paper Mario after that, the Thousand-Year Door on GameCube was really popular, and then even got to the point of the Wii where you could go to like 3D and everything. And then you look at the DS Sticker Star and you're like, why did they kill the franchise? Like, you obviously just took my money and ran because this is the dumbest game ever. Like, it's just the paper gimmick of the sticker, but then that's it. That's the only part that's original Paper Mario, and then you're like, okay, this is why people don't do 2D gaming, because they see this and it just kind of evolves into crap. Like,
I'm with you there on Sticker Star. Sticker Star, has anyone played that? So I had never really played the Paper Mario series, so I started with that one. I know, sorry. So I started with that one because I wanted to get into it. It was not, like you said, it was not the best choice. I think the reason for that, though, is it's the kind of thing where they tried to make it more simplified than it already was, and it was already RPG 101 from the very beginning. So what they were trying to do was try to simplify the battle system so that the only thing you had to do as far as like making commands was, okay, you got stickers. You collect stickers, and these stickers have different things you can do. You push one to attack, you push one to cast a spell, you push one to jump, etc., etc.
It's pretty much they were taking like a card battle system.
Exactly. It was kind of like Final Fantasy VIII in that way, that you had a limited number of moves, and you had to collect the moves outside of battle to really do anything. And it was not the best move, because by doing that you take away what's inherently appealing about RPGs, and that's, feeling a sense of achievement through hard work. That's the reason why people grind. People grind because they like grinding. I don't care what people complain about. It's in the end it's worth it, or at least it feels like it's worth it.
well, the series has badges and all kinds of other items that you collect, even moves and things like that, and you just look at Sticker Star and you're like, you didn't even play the same game. Like, it just made me really sad.
Well,
that's why nobody wants to play it.
So I think it's, I'm totally going to misuse the word evolution here, but because I might be more meaning natural selection. But yes, I still say that game series evolve, but the problem with evolution is that sometimes it's a dead end, and you'll see that. It's easy to say that any given series will start off somewhere, have a peak somewhere in the middle, and then drop off into nothing. I mean, Castlevania pretty easily follows that. It started good, and it got I would say, not even arguably at its peak with Symphony of the Night, and then it's crashed into nothing now. They're not doing it anymore. For things like, and maybe even for Paper Mario as well, but there are avenues. Some games just do more or less the same thing over and over with very, very small changes. Pokemon.
Dynasty Warriors.
Dynasty Warriors. Dragon Quest, and those are playing it safe. The very small changes. Some games go with huge changes every time. They kind of roll the dice and maybe this will be the next big hot thing. Final Fantasy. It's a change up every single game.
Oh, Final Fantasy.
And even things like Super Mario, it has its peaks and its valleys, not one of each, but over and over. Super Mario 64 was great. Sunshine, not so much. And then Galaxy was amazing. And it goes like that. It's not anything that's easily.
This is an important question for you. Going down the line, why don't you like Super Mario Sunshine? Why does everybody?
Well, that's assuming a lot, sir. I don't know.
I thought Sunshine was alright.
I like Sunshine. I thought it was great.
It's okay as a game. If it's by itself as a game, it's good. I don't think it's a very good Mario game. The reasoning behind that is that the water backpack took away for me the sense of, I don't know, danger, for lack of a better word. It's like, oh, if you miss that jump, it's okay because you got the water backpack. You can just kind of skirt over to the side. It's like that's a fine game, but it's not a Mario game to me. I felt that the bonus stages where you don't have the backpack, I was like, that's awesome. I want more of this because you're jumping. If you miss it, you fall to death. That's Mario, you know.
I actually haven't played it, so.
Okay, yeah. Real talk, I'm like the biggest Mario fan ever. Like when I was in elementary school, sometimes I'd go to school dressed as Mario. That being said,
What a dork.
yes, I have pictures of that. They will never see the light of day. But that being said, I haven't played it.
Oh wow.
Wow.
So, because as you said, it doesn't look like a Mario.
It kind of came out at an interesting time because the GameCube was kind of handicapped from a sales perspective right from the beginning because it.
No, but even I mean, I really like Wind Waker.
Oh yeah, Wind Waker's awesome. But see, the thing that's my point because at that time Nintendo was all gung ho about let's throw stuff out there that's gonna freak people out. Let's turn Zelda into a cartoon and make Link 10 years old. Let's take Mario and just sun drench it and give him a water pack on his back that'll shoot up in the air.
Let's make Metroid a first-person shooter.
Let's make
It kind of has that mentality of like the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
When Luigi's Mansion came out, that was fucking weird.
That's
you know?
true.
Yeah.
Actually.
They gave Luigi, it was a Ghostbusters game, pretty much.
Yeah.
You know?
And they had absolutely no reason to do any of those things because they were getting thrashed by the PS2. So, weird. Nintendo's weird. Yes.
I had a question about sort of leading from the whole Castlevania thing. About maybe why don't some companies go back to basic formulas? Because I would shell all of my money out just to see a classic Castlevania again. Or, I mean, Capcom had some success when they went back with the regular Mega Man style, Mega Man 9 and 10. I don't see why, not go back and do a classic Castlevania in 2D stage format.
There was the WiiWare game.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great question.
From what I see of Konami, they're just idiots.
I'm a big fan of Jim Sterling's work on The Escapist, and he talks a lot about this kind of subject, and it all really comes from corporate greed, basically. Game companies apparently would love to make all of the money and nothing else. There's no room for compromise. If they can't make all the money, they would rather just starve. It's either something has to appeal to every single demographic out there to sell 1 million copies, or it's a failure. That's why you have games like the newest Tomb Raider.
We're going to call it a financial failure.
Yeah, calling it a financial failure. Even if it sold 5 million,
5 to 6 million copies. 6
million copies. Back in the day, that would have been unheard of. That would be considered unqualified success. Now it's well, son, I'm disappointed in you, that kind of thing. So it's bizarre how we're at that point now.
I would actually disagree, because I think if a company was just wanting to go with the easy route of all companies want to make money, let's face it. Nintendo doesn't love you, Nintendo wants to make money.
Let's get onto the enabler.
Yeah, let's get it out there. But anyway, I would say that if a company is just being flat out greedy and they want to take the easy way out, they would just repeat the same thing over and over. Like Call of Duty, Smash,
EA.
Pokemon. I mean, we already said all these things. I would think. So the real question is, I don't think that's the answer to why doesn't Konami do an old school Castlevania? Why doesn't Capcom get their act together with Mega Man? I don't think that's the answer. Having said that, I don't know what the answer is because it really does seem dumb. It seems like easy money.
We are starting to reach that point now where, like Joey mentioned before, was that there was a time when 2D was considered a thing of the past. That every game had to be like Ocarina of Time, and everything had to be 3D, and you had to have these open worlds. You had to do everything that Zelda did. Now we're starting to get to that point where a game like Shovel Knight or a game like Super Meat Boy, for example, could make millions of dollars just selling a game that is still familiar to people, you know, in a genre that people are familiar with.
Maybe Capcom's afraid because of how well Beautiful Joe did.
Could be.
They tried.
I do have an anecdote. I'll start out with the saying, never ascribe to malice what you can attribute to stupidity. Earthbound. People have been clamoring in America for Earthbound on the Virtual Console since Virtual Console was a thing, so like 2006. And they only came out with it last year. And I have a friend who works for Nintendo of America, and he said, so, yeah, this was Nintendo of Japan's call. They basically give us the marching orders on almost everything. Hey, this isn't being recorded. Yeah, it is. Whatever. So, when the first time that Nintendo of Japan realized that Earthbound was a big thing and not just this unknown failure in America was when Miiverse and Miiverse posts were a thing, and people were drawing nests and saying, bring us Earthbound, and they're looking at this like, what? People want Earthbound in America? Sure, why not? Give it to them, okay. And because they honestly didn't know. Maybe that's it. And this goes back to maybe this is part of a disconnect with the Japanese game industry, at least with multiple. I mean, Nintendo's relatively to a lot of Japanese game developers doing fairly well.
Has it sold though?
Earthbound?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, top 10 in the virtual
Okay, cool. I
console.
thought you were going to say the opposite.
No, it sold very well. I mean, I owned it. I bought it again because.
You should all buy it.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah, I want to.
But I mean, that's why it's just a disconnect. Even in today's really connected society, with the internet and phone calls and everything, you know, there's head honchos that maybe are so insular that they just don't realize that's actually what the people want. And you know what? If they're surrounded with the wrong people, they won't get told that either.
So you're pretty much saying, if I post on Miiverse, put Goku and Smash Brothers, it will happen.
Ask and ye shall receive. I think we have time for one more question.
What do you guys think about the direction? You mentioned Final Fantasy, the direction that franchise is going in.
Oh, don't even get me started about Final Fantasy.
That's a bad question to end it on. So.
I'm gonna say 15 actually looks something like I would be interested in because it looks like Uncharted.
Okay, so Final Fantasy. Yes, actually 15 does look like the most interesting game in a long time because it is so drastically different from what we've experienced before. It's the Final Fantasy VII syndrome all over again because Final Fantasy VII was so very different from everything that came before. Now, 6 was kind of like steampunkish in a way, but 7 was the way that really said, okay, let's add machine guns, let's add lasers, let's add robots, you know, all this kind of stuff.
Dirty words.
Dirty words to the fantasy crowd. So yeah, with 15, it's interesting, but then again, you're kind of okay. So with Final Fantasy, you kind of expect it. You want them to constantly change things. To argue that this isn't what the game I remembered is kind of pointless with Final Fantasy because from its very beginning, the game was made to reinvent itself every single time. So to complain that this isn't exactly the way I remember it is ridiculous. You know, if you want to play Final Fantasy 6 or 4 or whatever again, go play those games. They're still great. They still hold up. So, but yeah, so like 15 looks very promising. I just kind of wish it was turn-based instead of real time, but whatever.
I've gotten to the point with Final Fantasy. My favorite game is Final Fantasy 6. But I've gotten to the point where I don't have blind loyalty to the series anymore. I don't even care too much about Final Fantasy. I need to be wowed. I'm not going to just automatically buy it. It's just too much to change, and it's not because I'm being an old fuddy-duddy. I actually really enjoyed Final Fantasy X a lot, but the changes they made with 12 and then 13, I'm like not feeling it. And I actually discovered more of a love for. I always loved Dragon Quest, but even more so recently because it's that comfort food. You know, like I was saying before, it's very incremental changes, and you kind of know what you're going to get. And I think I might have gotten too much whiplash with Final Fantasy lately.
I really think that the changing things as they go along aspects, so they're not the same game, they're not the same style, really can work. I think that Final Fantasy is good to do that because if it find something that doesn't work and they stick with it, they're screwed. And they're kind of going down that path in a certain direction of control, the level of control and the level of intricacy interacting with things is being stripped away over time, or has been over the past few games, I'd argue. But I'd say that they're on the right, they have the right idea, but they're not executing it properly. An example of a counter would be the Persona games. If you look at the first one, they evolve a little bit by piece, and they take what's criticized and they address it with each game, like re-release. So it just depends on how you activate that idea.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy did used to reinvent itself each time, but it would reinvent itself into a good game. And given I love
Point
Final Fantasy,
taken.
Final Fantasy 4 is my favorite game of all time.
And apparently squares too.
Yeah. And also, it's the most ported Final Fantasy,
Yes.
isn't it?
I mean, all
Yeah.
it's a little different.
Yes. If you enjoy old school Final Fantasy and if you have not played Bravely Default yet, play
Yeah,
Bravely
yes.
Default. Okay.
Wait, I was actually going to say, because I was watching a panel at PAX East this past year, and one of the questions was, like, why are JRPGs dead? And the answer put forth by Jason Schreier from Kotaku, who's actually a really good game journalist, basically said, they're not, it's just what you've already always seen. The Square Enix RPGs are definitely struggling as of late, but there's a lot of great stuff out there. Bravely Default, which I know is very shut up. And I think, I don't know if I mentioned here or in the previous panel, but Xenoblade Chronicles is really excellent. Last Story. There are a lot of great RPGs still coming out of Japan. They're just not the ones that you've always, they don't belong to those legacy series necessarily.
Do not be afraid to experiment.
You know what's pretty interesting is that RPGs are doing better on mobile devices. Because like that matches the medium. Because if you're pressing A anyways. So if you do that, if you're just tapping the screen, it's the same thing.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Thank you guys for coming. You guys have been all kinds of kick-ass. If you're still interested in geeking out with us and want to ask us questions, you ain't get a chance to ask us. We have a booth in the dealer's hall. Just stop on by. We'd be happy to have you. David, you have a...
I have a panel tonight at 5 o'clock, and we're going to play some awful Saturn games. And we'll also play some multiplayer Bomberman and Death Tank as well.